Welcome to Wisdom on Wheels. Today we'll be getting to know Metropolitan Savas from the Greek Orthodox Archdiocese of America. Well, first, thank you for being willing to do this and to join us.
It's always good to see you.
Absolutely, yes. Likewise, Your Eminence. You know, some of your fans have dubbed you the Bishop of Facebook. And obviously, this is because you're an early adopter to these types of platforms. What initially drew you to social media, and how has it impacted your ministry?
Well, I came on it by surprise, as most people of my generation. I think most people, you know, when they first heard about it, wondered what was going on. And it actually happened in Constantinople at a youth symposium. Somebody approached me and said, you know, your Grace, I was the bishop at the time, you have a Facebook fan page. And I said, what is that? I had no idea what you're talking about. And he described it to me, and I still didn't know what he was talking about. But then, you know, I followed the directions and located the thing, the Facebook world, and thought, this looks like a curious, you know, way to interact. And so, you know, I just signed on. And that was 15 years ago, and I've been learning by doing, you know.
Wow. So how many followers do you have now?
I've chosen to remain just a person with a personal Facebook page. So I've maxed out. I make that point because there's a limit of 5,000.
I see.
And then there are people that can follow you, and there's another 6,000 that follow me. So it's not, you know, enormous by today's standards.
That's nice though, because it's not impersonal, right? You're still a person on there. You still have your own program. You're looking at everything, and you're bringing people. Well,
I'm listed as Savas Symbillus, you know, and
sure.
then in brackets Metropolitan Savas of Pittsburgh. So I mean, I don't present. I have a Facebook page that is connected to my metropolis,
sure.
But you know, and that's for more official announcements of where I'll be and who will be speaking at what event, and posting of pictures from visitations and things like that. But my own is more personal and more playful. You know, I don't say this is that what I'm posting is the teaching of the church, although I certainly hope never to deviate from the teaching of the church.
Of course.
But I don't know that the church has an opinion on the Beatles, or on Dylan. You know,
right.
I mean, this is just my personal preference, and I'm trying to just demonstrate that, you know, we are all people of, you know, we're all rich and complicated people.
Absolutely. You know? Well, and speaking of Dylan and the Beatles, you're well known for your love of music. You even have a legacy brick, if I'm not mistaken, in the Plaza of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Yeah. That was very thoughtful on the part of the kids of Cleveland. You know, what do you get the bishop on his first visit? And the Goy advisors of the Annunciation Church there knew what I wanted, as it were. Even I wouldn't have known, you know, that there was such a thing. But they decided to have an event at the Rock Hall, and they gave me a brick, a good-sized one that goes into, you know, the pavement leading into the Rock Hall. And I had it was just a wonderful opportunity, a great way to interact with the kids, and I'm grateful for it.
So it's from the mouths of babes. They knew you better than you knew you. They knew what you wanted. That's amazing. Who are some of your favorite artists, and why did they become your favorite artists?
Well, you know, I just turned 65, which means I grew up in a particularly vibrant time when it came to popular music. You know, I was a kid. I was in first grade when the Beatles arrived here. And, you know, my childhood, you know, my development was marked by progress in popular music, you know, largely led by the Beatles. I mean, the Beatles were a kind of planet that was forming in plain sight. You know, I mean, they were going from simple, well, they were never actually simple, but kind of just poppy ditties about boy-girl love, and with trad structures, and then they were just constantly pushing themselves in terms of studio techniques, enriching their sound, experimenting with the kind of things that a pop song could address. You know, John Lennon dealing with his depression, as it were. Baby's in Black and I'm Feeling Blue, or Help, I Need Somebody. You know, I mean, these were new things, and then, you know, the cross-fertilization with other things that were happening, especially Dylan. You know, Dylan taking music that had its roots in the folk tradition and in sounds that had come over, you know, on the Mayflower, as it were, or you know, the immigrants had brought with them and developed in their small town and backwoods communities, and taking that stuff and using it to engage the current moment. I mean, he wasn't just repeating folk stuff, he was developing folks' attitudes towards current events, and then moving beyond that too. There was all this forward movement in pop music. There's certain kinds of music that the world throws at us that is like, wow, that is really ugly, but it's a kind of mirror of the moment.
Absolutely.
So, you know, I even that stuff I think is at least interesting.
I mean, it's great because you're seeing people who are using their talents to really impact their society and do something good. Like you said, there's times where maybe it's...
Yeah, but I mean, for instance, let me just say a little bit about Dylan. You know, I kind of started off that Dylan was the guy who used folk vernacular or genre to address, you know, issues of the current war or poverty and that kind of thing. But then he kind of disavowed that, or said, I don't want to be contained by that. I want to talk about the workings of my mind and my emotional life. And he started throwing up poetry that, you know, you might have read in a class on French surrealism or something, but you wouldn't expect to hear it on the radio.
Right.
You know.
Right, yeah.
So I mean, the way that, you know, these boundaries were being pushed, and you know, that a pop song can be about a state of consciousness. I mean, that's all really wild.
Absolutely.
You know?
But you're not just an admirer of music, you also are a musician, from my understanding.
Well, I'm not as much of a musician as I like to be. I mean, I love to be around musicians. You know, it's a great joy for me to be in a room of music makers. My brother Mitri is a. It's wonderful to go home and visit my brother Mitri because he's a largely self-taught guitarist, harmonica player. But you know, for several years he threw himself into that with a passion, and we have a overlap of artists that we like, and it's just relaxing for me to visit family, and I got nephews and nieces, and they all from various tributaries have wonderful musical gifts. So you know, when the clan gathers, the natural thing to do is to make music.
Wow.
And that's the most relaxing thing to me. That's vacation, you know.
Absolutely. Does the title King of Karaoke mean anything to you?
Well, I mean, yeah. See, I mean, that demonstrates my musical limitations. I'm not a musician per se. I can strum a few chords, but I mean, my principal gift, I suppose, is vocalizing. So it's all a kind of karaoke, I guess. If it. In my case, I mean, I sing to a band. But I've always had a band, you know. I mean, in the seminary, I had a band, and when I studied in Oxford, I sang in a band. You know, now I have this thing on the internet. You know, between me and my brother Mitri, we call ourselves Mitri and the Metro, and we release an occasional video. Whenever I go home, we do a song by the Beatles or the Kinks or the Everly Brothers or the Louvain Brothers, just something that has a nice harmony.
You mentioned Oxford, and when you were over in Oxford, you had a close relationship with Elder Saint Sophrony, and Metropolitan College Warren, and people like that. Can you tell us a little bit more about those relationships?
Well, actually, Elder Saint Sophrony was before Oxford. I mean, I had, after graduating from college in Waterville, Maine, with degrees in English literature and philosophy, I entered the workforce for a couple of years in the Boston area. In fact, I was a professional coffee roaster while I was trying to think through my next step. But, you know, I experienced a kind of reconversion, as it were. I came to appreciate Orthodoxy or Christianity initially with a greater intensity than I had during my college years, and I was fascinated by monastic literature, and so I left for a year. I broke off with all my worldly. I left the world. I intended to go to Mount Athos and not come back. And it was, a dramatic leap. I'd given away all my worldly possessions and my books and my records. I wanted to make people to realize how serious I was. There was nothing to come back to. And I went, and I spent a couple months on Mount Athos and a few months on Patmos and on another monastery here, another monastery there, until eventually I ended up at the monastery of St. John the Baptist in Essex, Tolleshunt Knights, and I got to spend 4 months in the company of the Brotherhood and Sisterhood there. It was Father Sophrony who told me after 4 months that it would be in my best interest. He thought, because I would go to him for confession advice, he thought I would be better served getting a formal education at the seminary. And so he was encouraging about my study and all that, but suggested that I go to the seminary in Brookline, and then if I still felt that I had a monastic vocation, to come back after I graduated. But when I went to Oxford, it was several years after that. I went to Oxford from 87 to 94, and in fact, Father Sophrony reposed shortly after I got back to Oxford. So I never really saw him when I went back to England. But, his influence has been profound in my life. It was also, again, I've been blessed to have lived in interesting places at interesting times. The Orthodox community in Oxford, as many will know or remember, because I think it's developed in different ways over the years. But when I was there in 87, it was a Russian-Greek community, but also, it had a really complicated. Neither community was large enough at the time or had the resources that would have made it possible for them to have separate churches, places of worship. So they had pooled their resources, and they had come up with a very interesting way of living together despite some very real differences. I mean, they retained their liturgical languages and their calendars, and people were drawn to Orthodoxy through their witness, and some came in by means of the Russians and some came in by means of the Greeks, and their music traditions and their liturgical traditions. So there was a lot that had to be negotiated.
So perhaps the Assembly of Bishops can look to that model as we navigate things here in the United States.
Well, we have a lot more factors to
Right.
take into consideration, but it is just not as easy as willing it. Desiring it is a large part of it, but you got to work it out, because we have so many different differences, not just liturgical and that kind of thing, but we do bring cultures with us. Our cultures are all blessed, but we become devoted to our cultural form, and it becomes difficult for us to let something go. We sometimes think that we want everything the way we're used to it, and that it makes for some hard negotiating.
Absolutely.
But, and I believe that if it's God's will, and I believe it is God's will, it'll happen in time. But it seems to be taking a lot of time.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. You mentioned that you were a coffee bean roaster, and so I was just wondering, as a young child, did you dream of being a clergy member? Did you dream of all that? And were there other jobs you had, that might be interesting for people to know about from when you were in your younger years?
Well, I mean, I'm a native of Gary, Indiana, and my father was an immigrant from Greece, and my mother was a child of immigrants who had moved up to Gary from Tarpon Springs, Florida. And my father had a little grocery store in Gary, and I grew up working the store with my brothers and sisters. We were churchgoers, obviously, and especially influenced by my paternal grandmother, my father's mother, who had very nearly become a nun when she was a child in Kalimos, and had a great love for the liturgy of the church, and was a gifted chanter. And so, there was that influence from her, but I never expected to grow up to this. I mean, she might have thought that. She might have said it, and by saying it, I would just push back and say, no, that's not me. I think the first thing I knew I wanted to be was an archaeologist. Oh. Just because I loved all that stuff about, discovery of ancient civilizations and things. I couldn't get enough of that. Kind of the Indiana Jones thing before Indiana Jones,
Absolutely. That's amazing.
But then I don't think there must have been a time when I thought of myself as possibly being a writer, because the thing that came most naturally to me as a kid was reading.
And you're still an avid reader.
Yeah.
What are some of your favorite books?
Well, I think...
That was a difficult question.
No, but God works in strange ways. No, God works in strange ways. And I was elected Bishop of Troas, which was something I had to learn about. Where's Troas? And it turned out to be a city on the coast of Asia Minor, now Turkey, that was within a matter of a few miles of ancient Troy. Because I became the Bishop of Troas, I thought, well, here's an excuse to get to know Homer better, And I started reading, the Iliad and the Odyssey regularly from that point on, because the Bishop of Troy, that's just awesome.
Right.
I have to say, the Iliad is probably as good as it gets.
Wow.
I'm just amazed by how much, how this thing is the first thing out of the starting gate when it comes to world literature, and how much it does. How profound it is about. Well, I can't start on that. We'll never finish.
And so what does your average day look like from the time you get up until the time you go to bed? I know every day for a bishop's got to be completely different, but on average, maybe.
Well, on average, I'm committed over the years to updating my Facebook. I wake up, I pray, I go to the scripture readings of the day, I post them on my Facebook, and I know that they can be found on any number of sites. You can go to your parish website, your Metropolis website, and they'll give you the scripture of the day. But I like to take the scripture and present it almost in thought units. I break it down for myself so that it's not a lump. Because when I see a lump of prose, I kind of glance and say, well, what's that about? Oh, prodigal son, I know it. And I just glide over it. But if I take it and I have to say, there was a man, and then who had two sons, and set it up almost as a prose poem, I'm interacting with it in a way. I'm reading it closely. I'm thinking about it again. So I post it, as it were, ostensibly for my people, but who follow me, but I'm doing it for me. And then I go to, look for the saints of the day or some historical commemoration, and then I search for news relevant to the Orthodox Church about, us specifically, or about an event that will impact us in some way, the church, the greater Christian community or the greater religious community. I kind of keep the net going out in widening circles, as it were, looking for stuff. And then I, look at my other things that I like to read, check out, what's happening in the world of literature, the world of music, the world of politics, the world of whatever. And I'll take some select stuff and post it there for people's pleasure, edification, whatever. And that'll take me an hour. And then I, engage with my responsibilities. I will have set up appointments. My staff will have set up appointments for me, either in person or by Zoom. And or there may be a parish visitation. I engage with the work. And then the work often extends beyond the work day. I mean, you meet people when you can and when they can and all that. And I generally end the evening reading. I hardly ever turn the TV on anymore.
Wow.
You know, I feel like time's running out and I got to get through all these books I bought.
What's your ideal vacation?
Well, I have grown to love Italy, and I like to go there because I don't have to, present all the time. I don't have to be in Catholic and all that all the time. I can be a kind of anonymous person and just follow my interests. I mean, there's nothing more relaxing for me than to go to a wonderful museum or a beautiful cathedral. So, yeah, it's just wonderful.
Absolutely. Well, I want to thank you, Your Eminence, for your time and for being willing to come on the show today. I know a lot of the followers of the Assembly of Bishops enjoy learning more about the hierarchs and their personal sides of their life. So just thank you so much, and look forward to continuing the collaboration towards unity in America.
Amen. Amen. You look as young as you ever been.
Oh, I don't know. There's a lot more gray up here than there used to be.
Oh, well, you hide it well.
That's why I cut my hair short. I have to.
Yeah.